Since when does a mother need to buy a ticket to sit at her own Christmas table? My daughter asked as she slid the folded receipt beneath my coffee mug. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I only looked at the paper, then at my daughter's smile, and understood that something inside my family had changed while I was busy grieving. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. That Christmas morning my kitchen smelled like cinnamon rolls, roasted ham, fresh coffee, and the pine-scented candles I had been burning since Thanksgiving. Outside my window, snow covered the backyard in a clean white blanket, untouched except for tiny bird tracks near the fence. It should have felt warm. It should have felt like home. Instead, I sat at my own oak dining table, in the house my husband Harold and I paid off 21 years earlier, staring at a bill for $438.16. Christmas dinner contribution, prime rib roast, imported cheeses, wine pairing, decorative linens, fresh floral arrangement, peppermint coffee creamer. Even the coffee creamer I had bought myself 3 days earlier was listed there. Claire buttered a biscuit across from me as if nothing unusual had happened. We all pitched in this year, she said lightly. Food prices are insane lately. Her husband Daniel chuckled without looking up from his phone. My granddaughter Sophie sat beside him, poking at scrambled eggs with her fork. I folded the receipt carefully and placed it beside my plate. I see, I said. Claire smiled, relieved. That was the thing about daughters like Claire. They counted on silence. They depended on mothers like me staying polite long after politeness stopped being deserved. Mom, don't take it personally, Claire added. We're just trying to be fair this year. Fair. The word settled in my chest heavier than the winter air outside. 40 years earlier, when Claire was 7, she cried because we could not afford the dollhouse she wanted from Sears. Harold worked double shifts at the paper mill. I stayed up past midnight sewing alterations for neighbors until my fingers cramped. Claire got the dollhouse. Now, decades later, I was being charged admission to eat Christmas breakfast inside the home I had built with my own life. Daniel finally looked up. It's really not a big deal, Margaret, he said in that calm corporate voice. Everybody contributes these days. Everybody. I looked around the dining room slowly. The same room where Claire used to tape construction paper angels to the wall. The same table where Harold carved turkey every Christmas Eve until arthritis made his hands too stiff. The same window where Sophie pressed her little palms years ago, waiting for snow. Last year, after Harold passed away, I polished that table alone while old Frank Sinatra records played through the house because silence felt too cruel to survive. Now the house felt staged. Like everyone had arrived wearing invisible costumes. Sophie glanced at me nervously. Grandma, she whispered. The cinnamon rolls are really good.
I smilte her.
Thank you, sweetheart. Claire leaned back and crossed her legs. Honestly, Mom, Daniel and I talked about this for a while. We think it's healthier when everyone shares responsibility, instead of expecting one person to carry holidays financially. There it was. Not just the bill. The accusation hidden beneath it. As though I had forced them into generosity. As though Christmas had been a burden they reluctantly survived. I looked toward the living room, where the stockings still hung over the fireplace. Claire's stocking was faded red velvet with little white snowflakes stitched near the top. I made it myself in 1989. My fingers suddenly remembered every tiny stitch. Funny how the body remembers love even after people forget it. Claire gathered plates casually. And Mom, she added over her shoulder, if money's tight, you can always split the payment over a couple months. For a moment nobody spoke. Even the refrigerator hum sounded louder. Sophie stared into her lap. I picked up the receipt again and studied the total. $438.16. Such a small number compared to what motherhood had cost me. Sleep, time, dreams, a marriage. Sometimes, entire pieces of myself, handed away willingly because I believed family meant building something together. But sitting there that Christmas morning, watching my daughter charge me for breakfast in my own home, I realized something cold and sharp. Claire no longer saw this house as my home. In her mind it was already hers. And somehow, without me noticing, I had become the guest. After breakfast, Claire opened presents beside the fireplace while snow drifted softly against the windows. Sophie sat cross-legged on the rug in matching plaid pajamas, carefully peeling tape from gift boxes so she could save the wrapping paper. Daniel had turned on a football pregame show, though nobody was really watching it. The television only filled the spaces where conversation used to live. I carried dishes into the kitchen slowly. My hands felt steady, too steady, like my body had decided to move ahead without waiting for my heart to catch up. Claire wandered in holding her mimosa. "Mom, you really did not have to go so overboard this year," she said. "There is enough food here for 20 people. I always make too much at Christmas. Well, maybe next year we simplify things. People our age are trying to move away from all this pressure." People our age. Claire was 42 and suddenly speaking as if she had carried decades of sacrifice on her back. Half the cinnamon rolls sat untouched. The candles near the centerpiece had burned low, leaving little rivers of wax across the gold tray Harold bought me during an anniversary trip to Boston. Everything looked beautiful from a distance. That was the dangerous thing about families. Sometimes they looked healthiest right before they broke apart. Sophie appeared beside me with an empty mug. "Can I have more hot chocolate, Grandma?" "Of course." I poured milk into a saucepan while Claire scrolled through her phone. "Oh my God!" She laughed suddenly. "Melissa's mother gave them cash for Disney tickets this year. Honestly, that is the smartest gift anyone could ask for." She said it loudly enough for me to hear. Deliberately loudly. I stirred the cocoa. "That sounds nice." Claire leaned against the counter. "You know, experiences matter more than objects now. Families help each other differently these days." There it was again. Gentle language wrapped around something sharp. Not requests. Expectations. I handed Sophie the mug carefully. "Thank you," she said. Claire lowered her voice. "Daniel and I have also been talking about summer plans. If we do Europe next year, we'll probably need somebody to stay here and watch the dogs." I looked at her. "You mean me?" "Well, you love the house anyway," she said with a shrug. "And honestly, traveling that far is exhausting at your age." At your age. Funny how children slowly start speaking to their parents the same way nurses speak to patients. Soft. Managed. Careful around the edges. "Maybe I would like to see Europe someday too," I said. Claire blinked, genuinely surprised. "Mom, be realistic." Realistic. Another word that had started appearing more often lately. Realistic about stairs. Realistic about driving in snow. Realistic about managing such a large home alone. Harold used to say people rarely announce when they are trying to remove you from your own life. They do it gently. One practical suggestion at a time. Daniel walked into the kitchen carrying his plate. "Margaret, this prime rib was incredible," he said. "Almost restaurant quality." "Thank you." He nodded toward the receipt near the fruit bowl. "And really don't stress over that thing. Claire just likes everybody contributing equally." Equally. I remembered sanding these cabinets myself 15 years earlier because we could not afford contractors. I remembered clipping coupons for Claire's dance lessons. I remembered skipping winter coats so she could have braces before high school. Funny how equality only arrives after a mother has already paid for everything. Sophie suddenly looked up. "Grandma built Christmas," she said quietly. The room went still. Claire laughed awkwardly. "Sweetheart, what does that even mean?" Sophie shrugged into her cocoa. "I just mean Christmas feels like Grandma." Nobody answered her after that. That afternoon the snow kept falling in heavy sheets, covering the street until the neighborhood looked softer than it really was. Claire and Daniel stayed because the roads were icy. Sophie stretched out on the living room carpet watching an old Christmas movie. Daniel half dozed in Harold's recliner with football humming in the background. Claire sat at the kitchen island scrolling through vacation rentals on her tablet, like she had mentally left my house hours ago. I stood near the sink drying wine glasses when I heard her laugh softly. "Look at this place," she called. 6 bedrooms. Oceanfront. Heated pool. Daniel glanced over. "How much?" "About 12,000 for the week." He whistled. "Not terrible if everybody contributes." Everybody contributes. The phrase was beginning to sound less like conversation and more like policy. Claire turned the tablet toward him. "If we split it between us, Melissa and her husband, and maybe Mom helps with Sophie's portion, it becomes completely manageable." My hand stopped against the glass. Claire did not even look at me when she said it. She just assumed the answer was already waiting inside my wallet. I do not remember agreeing to a beach house, I said. Claire looked up, surprised I had spoken. Well, we haven't officially discussed it yet. You already included my money in the math. Her smile tightened. Mom, it's not like that. I waited. She sighed. Okay, honestly, sometimes it feels like you always assume the worst about me lately. The words almost impressed me. Claire had always been talented at rearranging guilt until it pointed in another direction. When she was 16 and crashed Harold's car into a mailbox, she cried so hard afterward that I ended up apologizing for raising my voice. Some people learn early that emotion can redirect consequence. Sophie muted the television quietly. Children notice tension faster than adults admit. Daniel sat up. Nobody is attacking anybody, he said. We're just talking about a family vacation. Family. That word again. Warm sounding. Conveniently flexible. I looked toward the hallway where framed family photos lined the wall. Claire at 10 holding a pumpkin at the county fair. Claire in her graduation dress. Claire dancing barefoot in this living room after Harold surprised her with a stereo system we could barely afford. Every picture had cost us something. Extra shifts. Deferred repairs. Years of putting our own lives second so hers could move first. And somehow none of that counted as contribution anymore. Claire walked toward the sink. Mom, you know we appreciate everything you've done, she said softly. But things are expensive now. Everybody has to help. I have helped, Claire. That's not what I meant. No, I said quietly. I think it is exactly what you meant. The kitchen fell silent. Daniel looked down at his phone. Sophie stared at the carpet. Claire crossed her arms. You're making this bigger than it is. Maybe she believed that. Maybe that was the saddest part. People rarely notice the exact moment gratitude disappears and entitlement takes its place. It happens gradually. One favor becomes expectation. One sacrifice becomes obligation. One generous mother becomes an aging woman whose usefulness is calculated at holiday dinners. Sophie finally spoke.
Grandma always pay.
Claire exhaled sharply. Sophie, stay out of adult conversations. But Sophie did not look at her mother. She looked at me. And for the first time all day, I realized someone else in that house could see it too. That night, after the roads were cleared enough for Claire and her family to leave, the house became painfully quiet again. I stood at the front window watching their SUV disappear beneath the falling snow until the red taillights vanished at the end of the street. For a while I kept standing there anyway. The living room still smelled like cinnamon candles and roasted coffee. Wrapping paper sat in uneven piles near the fireplace. One of Sophie's fuzzy socks had been left under the coffee table beside a half-finished mug of cocoa. Little traces of people who no longer truly belonged to the house they occupied so comfortably. I picked up the mug. The cocoa had formed a thin skin across the top. Harold used to tease me because I could never throw away unfinished drinks right away. You always leave room for people to come back, he would say. Maybe he understood something about me long before I did. I carried dishes into the kitchen and began cleaning in silence. The clock above the stove ticked steadily. Snow brushed against the windows. Every sound felt louder when you lived alone. The faucet running.
Cabinet doors closing.
A spoon touching ceramic. Sometimes loneliness was not sadness. Sometimes it was simply noticing every noise because nobody else was there to interrupt it. I opened the refrigerator to put leftovers away when something caught my eye. A white bakery box tied with gold ribbon. I frowned. I had not bought dessert from the bakery. Everything on the table had been homemade. Inside sat an untouched chocolate torte with a receipt taped to the lid. Paid by Margaret Holloway. Amount: $86.40. I stared at it. 2 weeks earlier, Claire had called saying she wanted to help with Christmas dinner by ordering dessert from the expensive bakery downtown. I remembered thanking her, thinking she was trying to make things easier after Harold's death. I reached for the folded Christmas receipt near the fruit bowl. Chocolate torte bakery special. $86.40. Charged to me. I sat down at the kitchen table without meaning to. The chair creaked beneath me. Funny how betrayal rarely arrives all at once. Comes in layers. Tiny moments that seem harmless until the full picture sharpens like headlights through fog. Claire asking me to cover Sophie's summer camp registration, temporarily. Claire forgetting her wallet at restaurants more often than coincidence allowed. Claire insisting family phone plans were easier if I stayed on hers while quietly increasing my monthly share. Small things. Manageable things. The kind of things mothers excuse because love makes accountants out of nobody. My gaze drifted toward Harold's photograph on the windowsill. He smiled back from a fishing trip in Maine, his cap crooked from laughing too hard. Harold kept records of everything. Utility bills, mortgage statements, retirement papers. People behave differently around money than they do around love, he once told me. Money shows you who believes they are entitled to your sacrifices. At the time I thought he sounded cynical. I smoothed the bakery receipt flat. It was not about the cake. It was never about the cake. It was the certainty underneath it. The certainty that I would pay because I always had. Because mothers absorb costs quietly until people stop seeing the cost at all. That night, sitting in the dim Christmas lights, I realized something colder than grief. Claire no longer viewed my generosity as kindness. She viewed it as infrastructure.
Permanent.
Expected. Hers. 3 days after Christmas, the snow finally stopped. The neighborhood looked washed clean beneath a pale gray sky. Every rooftop was etched in white. Every mailbox wore a little cap of ice. I woke before sunrise and sat alone in the kitchen with a blanket around my shoulders, listening to the old heater rattle through the house. Harold used to wake before me every winter morning just to warm my coffee mug with hot water first. He said cold ceramic ruined good coffee. Funny the things grief chooses to preserve. Some memories fade. Others settle into your bones permanently. I was halfway through my second cup when I heard a soft knock at the back door. Nobody used the back door except family. I opened it and found Sophie standing there in a navy coat, snowflakes melting in her hair. Sophie. She stepped inside quickly, clutching her backpack. Mom thinks I'm at Emma Parker's house, she whispered. Did something happen? She shook her head too fast. No. I just wanted to bring you something. I helped her out of her coat while she avoided my eyes. Then she unzipped her backpack and pulled out a spiral notebook with purple flowers on the cover. I think you should have this, she said. What is it? Mom writes stuff down sometimes. Budgets and plans and things. A strange feeling settled low in my stomach. I sat at the table and opened the notebook. Grocery lists. School reminders. Phone numbers. Then halfway through, the handwriting changed into columns. Europe estimate. Disney fund. Kitchen remodel. Underneath were smaller notes in darker ink. Ask Mom about contribution after bonus check. Maybe she covers Sophie camp again. Sell Vermont house eventually. Too large for one person anyway. I did not move. The heater hummed behind me. Sophie twisted her gloves between her fingers. I wasn't snooping, she said quickly. I found it open on the counter when Mom was talking to Dad. I kept reading. Another line caught my eye. Once house transfers, renovate downstairs first. Transfers. Not if. Once. Grandma. Sophie whispered. I looked up. Her eyes were shiny with worry. I don't think Mom means to be mean all the time, she said. She just always talks about money when she talks about you. Something tightened in my chest. Not because it was cruel. Because it was honest. Children often describe reality clearly before adults teach them how to soften it into politeness. I closed the notebook gently. Thank you for bringing this to me. Please don't tell Mom. I won't. She looked relieved for half a second. Then sadness returned. Grandma. Yes, sweetheart. Are they trying to take your house? The question sat between us like something alive. I looked around the kitchen. The faded yellow curtains. Harold's radio near the pantry. The worn floorboards Sophie used to slide across in socks. This house had held every version of my life. Young wife. New mother. Widow. And now, apparently, an obstacle waiting politely to disappear. I don't know yet, I answered truthfully. Sophie stared down at the notebook. Mom says old people shouldn't live alone forever. Old people. Another category. Another quiet reduction. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Sometimes people confuse concern with control, I said softly. Sophie nodded like she understood more than a 12-year-old should. Then she leaned forward and wrapped her arms around me. I held her in the silent kitchen while snowmelt dripped from the gutters outside. And for the first time since Christmas morning, I knew I was not imagining any of it. The following Monday, I drove into town before sunrise while frost clung to the sidewalks and the church bells had not yet struck 8. I parked outside the small brick office building on Maple Street and sat in the car with both hands on the wheel. Harold's wool scarf still hung beside me in the passenger seat. I had not removed it since the funeral. Some things become harder to move the longer they stay still. The brass plaque beside the door read, Bennett and Reese Estate Law. Harold and I first walked into that office 27 years earlier with a shoebox full of savings bonds and handwritten retirement notes. Back then we worried about college tuition, leaking gutters, and whether Claire would ever learn to parallel park. Life felt manageable then because we believed effort guaranteed stability. Inside, the office smelled faintly of coffee and old paper. Thomas Reese looked older than I remembered. More silver in his hair, thinner around the shoulders. But his eyes softened when he saw me. "Margaret," he said gently. I was sorry to hear about Harold. "Thank you." He motioned to the chair. "What can I help you with?" For a few seconds I only looked around. Frame degrees. Shelves lined with binders. Snow-covered parking lot outside the window. Normal things. Safe things. Funny how difficult it is to admit trouble out loud once it involves your own child. "I think my daughter is planning my future without me," I said quietly. Thomas did not look surprised. That hurt more than I expected. I explained everything. The Christmas receipt. The bakery cake. The comments about the house. The notebook Sophie brought. Thomas listened without interrupting, occasionally writing on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, silence settled between us. "Margaret," he said gently, "has Claire ever had access to your financial accounts?" I looked down. Several years ago I added her name to one checking account. For emergencies. After Harold's heart condition worsened. Thomas sighed softly. Not dramatically. Just tired. Like a man who had seen this conversation too many times. "I think we should review everything." An hour later, folders and statements covered his desk. Small transfers. Reimbursements I did not remember approving. Subscription payments linked to Claire's address. Nothing dramatic. Nothing large enough to trigger alarm. Just steady little withdrawals spread carefully over time. "These are the kinds of transactions people justify to themselves," Thomas said quietly. "Especially family." Family. The word people use right before crossing lines they would never cross with. Strangers. "What do I do now?" I asked. Thomas folded his hands. "First, you protect yourself." By noon we had changed account permissions, updated legal access documents, and scheduled a full estate review. Thomas recommended placing the house into a protected trust structure that would prevent pressure or manipulation involving ownership transfers. "You worked your entire life for stability," he told me. "You are allowed to keep it." Allowed. Strange how older women slowly begin feeling like permission is required to remain in control of their own lives. Before leaving, I paused at the door. "Thomas." "Yes." "Did Harold ever worry about this?" Thomas hesitated. That hesitation answered before he spoke. "Your husband loved Claire very much," he said softly. "But he once told me you trusted people longer than he did." I looked down at the leather folder in my hands. Trust. Such a beautiful thing when placed correctly. Such an expensive thing when it is not. Outside, cold air hit my face sharply. Snow crunched beneath my boots. For the first time since Christmas morning, something inside me no longer felt wounded. Felt awake. January settled over Vermont like a long gray sigh. The Christmas decorations disappeared from the neighborhood one porch at a time until only bare trees and frozen sidewalks remained. Inside my house, things looked the same. Harold's books still lined the den shelves. My knitting basket still sat beside the couch. The ceramic snowman Sophie painted in 3rd grade still guarded the kitchen windowsill. But something inside me had shifted. Quietly. Like ice cracking beneath deep water. I stopped answering financial questions automatically. I stopped apologizing when I said no. Most importantly, I stopped explaining myself. Claire noticed almost immediately. "You sound tired lately," she said during an evening phone call. Maybe you should think about simplifying things. I folded laundry slowly. Simplifying what exactly? A pause. The house. The upkeep. It's a lot for one person. There it was again. Not concern. Direction. I manage just fine. For now, Claire replied carefully. But we have to think long-term too. Funny how people volunteer themselves into decisions involving someone else's life. I already am thinking long-term, I said. She laughed lightly. Mom, you know what I mean. I did. That was the problem. A few days later, Claire invited herself over for dinner. Daniel came too, carrying a bottle of wine expensive enough to look generous but not expensive enough to hurt. Sophie hugged me tightly when they arrived, lingering an extra second. Children feel tension even when nobody speaks it. I made pot roast with carrots and rosemary biscuits because winter dinners always felt steadier with familiar food. From the outside, we probably looked normal. Halfway through dinner, Daniel cleared his throat. Margaret, he began, Claire and I have been talking about something practical. I sipped my water. Have you? Claire smiled. We just worry about you here alone. I'm not alone. I have neighbors. That's not the same thing. Daniel leaned back. There are beautiful retirement communities outside Burlington now. Heated garages. Maintenance included. Activities. Retirement communities. Polished language for slowly removing people from the center of their own lives. I like my home, I said. Claire sighed. Mom, nobody is trying to take your home. The irony nearly made me laugh. Daniel spoke next. The market is strong right now. Houses in your neighborhood are selling fast. Selling. There it was. Finally spoken aloud. Sophie stared down at her plate. Claire reached for her wine glass. If you sold this place, you could downsize somewhere safer and still help Sophie with college someday. Help Sophie. Always the emotional bait first. Family. Safety. Grandchildren. Nobody says greed directly anymore. They wrap it in responsibility until selfishness sounds loving. And where exactly did you think I would go? I asked. Claire blinked. Well, somewhere easier. Easier for whom? Daniel attempted a reassuring smile. You deserve less stress at this stage of life. Stage of life. Another phrase designed to shrink a person slowly. I looked around the dining room. Harold's clock. The candlelight. The polished oak table. Then I looked back at my daughter. It is strange, I said. Softly. Hearing people discuss your future like you are no longer fully present for it. Nobody answered. Claire looked into her wine. Daniel cut his pot roast into careful little pieces. Sophie looked at me with an expression too old for 12. In that moment I realized they still believed I was only reacting emotionally. They thought grief had made me fragile. They did not understand I had already started protecting myself. By early February, the house no longer felt heavy to me. Quiet, yes. But not heavy. There is a difference. Grief weighs you down. Clarity steadies you. Every morning I woke before sunrise, made coffee in Harold's old percolator, and sat beside the kitchen window watching snow gather along the fence. Somewhere between Christmas and February, I stopped feeling like a wounded mother and started feeling like the owner of my own life again. Thomas finalized everything during the second week of the month. The trust documents. The account protections. The revised estate directives. Clean. Legal.
Permanent.
I signed the papers with Harold's fountain pen while soft jazz played through the office speakers. You seem calmer, Thomas observed. I think I finally understand what Harold meant. About what? People confusing access with ownership. Thomas nodded slowly. On the drive home, I passed the frozen lake where Harold used to take Claire skating every winter. I remembered standing near the shore with hot chocolate while Claire laughed every time Harold pretended to lose balance. Back then she reached for his hand whenever she slipped. Funny how adulthood changes what people grab onto. That Friday, Claire called unexpectedly cheerful. Mom, maybe everybody should have dinner together Sunday. It's been too tense lately. Too tense. Such polite language for months of quiet greed. Dinner sounds nice, I said. She sounded relieved. Great. We'll bring dessert this time. I almost smiled. Sunday arrived cold and clear. Snowbanks along the driveway had hardened into walls of ice beneath the pale sun. I spent the day cooking slowly. Potruast. Garlic mashed potatoes. Honey-glazed carrots. Lemon cake. Familiar things. Comforting things. By 6, the dining room glowed beneath candlelight while Frank Sinatra drifted from the speakers. Claire arrived carrying a bakery box and wearing the same expensive wool coat she had bought during an Aspen trip. Daniel followed with red wine. Sophie hugged me tightly. "It smells like Christmas again," she whispered. "Only better." During dinner, everyone behaved carefully polite. Claire complimented the food too often. Daniel laughed too easily. Even Sophie seemed nervous. Halfway through dessert, Claire cleared her throat. "Mom, Daniel and I found a beautiful townhouse community outside Burlington this week. Smaller properties. Safer in winter. You would really love it." There it was again. The soft push. The gentle relocation of my entire existence. I took a sip of coffee. "That is thoughtful." Claire relaxed. "We just think planning ahead makes sense." Daniel nodded. "Especially while the market is strong." I set my cup down. Then I reached beside my chair and lifted a cream-colored envelope onto the table. Claire's eyes flickered toward it. "What is that?" "Something important," I said calmly. "Since everybody seems concerned about planning ahead." I slid the envelope across the polished wood. Claire opened it while Daniel leaned closer. The room stayed quiet except for the fireplace. I watched Claire's expression change. Confusion. Disbelief. Then something colder. "What is this?" she whispered. "The house has been transferred into a protected family trust," I said evenly. "It cannot be sold, borrowed against, or reassigned." Daniel straightened. "Margaret, nobody was trying to force anything." I looked at him calmly. "Good. Then this changes nothing." Claire kept reading. "And this section? The property will eventually become a residency program for widowed women in the community." Silence filled the room. Sophie looked at me with wide eyes. Daniel shifted in his chair. Claire's face went pale. "You're giving the house away?" "No, Claire," I said. "I am deciding where it belongs." For the first time in months, nobody spoke to me like I was fragile. Nobody mentioned simplifying my life. Nobody talked about realistic options. They finally understood. I was not fading. Quietly out of my own story. Claire did not yell that night. That would have been easier. Anger is simple when it is honest. Instead, she went very quiet. She folded the documents back into the envelope with slow, careful hands and placed it on the table like it had burned her. "I don't understand why you would do this without talking to me," she said. I looked at her. "Because it was not your decision." Her mouth tightened. "I'm your daughter." "Yes. That should mean something." "It does," I said. "But it does not mean ownership." Daniel shifted. "Margaret, from a legal standpoint, this seems extreme. Thomas Reese disagrees." The mention of Thomas changed the air. Daniel sat back slightly. Claire looked toward Sophie, then quickly away. She did not want her daughter hearing too much. Not because she wanted to protect Sophie. Because children remember inconvenient truths. "You're punishing me," Claire said quietly. "No, how is this not punishment?" I folded my hands on the table. Punishment would be wanting you to hurt. Protection is choosing not to be harmed again. For a moment, Claire looked younger. Not innocent. Just exposed. Then the mask returned. "Well," she said, pushing back from the table, "I hope all those widows appreciate everything you're taking from your actual family." Sophie flinched. I saw it. So did Claire, though she pretended not to. Daniel stood, reaching for his coat. "We should go." Sophie came to hug me before leaving. Her arms were tight around my waist. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I smoothed her hair. "You have nothing to be sorry for." Claire stood by the door, stiff and silent. Snow blew across the porch behind her. For 1 second I almost softened. Almost. Old habits do not die quickly. A mother's instinct is to repair. To comfort. To make the room easier for everyone else. But peace built on self-erasure is not peace. It is surrender. So I stayed quiet. After they left, I sat at the dining room table for a long time. For plates still held crumbs of lemon cake. Daniel's wineglass had a red thumbprint near the rim. Claire's napkin lay twisted beside her plate. I thought I would feel triumphant. I did not. I felt tired. Morally difficult decisions do not always feel powerful. Sometimes they feel like locking a door with someone you love standing on the other side. But the door still needs locking. I gathered the dishes slowly. When I reached Claire's plate, I found Sophie had tucked something under it. A folded piece of notebook paper. "Grandma, I'm proud of you." Only 6 words. I pressed the paper to my chest and closed my eyes. For the first time in weeks I cried. Not loudly. Not the way people cry in movies. Just quietly, standing alone beside the table, with Harold's clock ticking on the wall and snow brushing the windows. Because dignity restored does not erase grief. It only gives grief somewhere safe to stand. Spring came slowly that year. The snow melted in dirty gray piles along the curbs. Water dripped from gutters. The old maple behind the house began showing small red buds at the ends of its branches. Claire did not call for 3 weeks. Then 4. Daniel sent one polite email asking for a copy of the trust paperwork for family records. Thomas told me not to respond directly. He handled it. I spent those weeks learning how quiet could feel different depending on what caused it. Before, the quiet had felt like abandonment. Now it felt like space. I began meeting with a local nonprofit in Burlington that helped older women after losing spouses, homes, or financial stability. At first, I only intended to donate the future use of the property. But then I met the women. Ruth Ann, 72, who had slept in her car for 9 nights after her stepson changed the locks. Maribel, 68, who still carried hospital paperwork in her purse because her children accused her of exaggerating her medical bills. Joan, 75, who apologized before every sentence, as if taking up space was something she needed permission for. They sat at my dining room table drinking coffee from mismatched mugs, and for the first time in a long while, the house felt useful without being taken from me. One afternoon, Ruth Ann ran her hand over the oak table. "This is a good table," she said. "My husband carved turkeys here for 30 years. She smiled. "Then it already knows how to hold people." That night, I stood in the doorway after everyone left and looked at the empty chairs. They did not feel empty in the same way. Claire eventually called in late April. Her voice was careful. "Sophie wants to see you." Not "I miss you." Not "I'm sorry." Sophie wants to see you. Still hiding behind someone else's need. "She can come Saturday," I said. A pause. "Can I come too?" I looked out the kitchen window. The yard was damp and brown. Not pretty yet, but honest. Yes. Saturday arrived with cold rain. Claire stood on my porch holding an umbrella, looking tired around the eyes. Sophie ran in first and hugged me hard. Claire stepped inside more slowly. "The house looks the same," she said. "It is." But it wasn't. Not really. She saw the nonprofit brochures on the side table, the extra mugs drying near the sink, the stack of donated blankets folded by the hallway. Something crossed her face. "You're really doing it." "Yes." She nodded but said nothing. During lunch she was polite. Too polite. Sophie filled the silence with school stories. I let her. When Sophie went upstairs to look for an old photo album, Claire remained at the table. "I didn't think you would actually go through with it," she said. "I know." Her eyes lifted. "That's what hurts, Mom." I waited. "That you think I'm capable of using you like that." The old version of me would have rushed to comfort her. The new version simply said, "Claire, I did not imagine the receipts." She looked away. Rain tapped against the windows. "I don't know when I started thinking of you as available," she said finally. Available. It was an ugly word. But it was true. "And I don't know when I stopped asking," she added. That was not an apology. Not yet. But it was the first honest sentence she had given me in months. I let it sit between us. Some truths need silence around them. Summer softened the town. The sidewalks warmed. Children rode bicycles past my front yard. The garden Harold planted years ago came back unevenly, stubborn in some places, bare in others. Like family. Sophie visited often. Sometimes Claire brought her. Sometimes Daniel did. Sometimes Sophie came with a neighbor after school, carrying a backpack and a hunger only grandmothers understand. Claire and I did not return to what we had been. Maybe we never would. There were no dramatic apologies. No tillfälligen reconciliation. No sudden transformation where everyone understood everything perfectly. Real families rarely heal that way. Instead, there were small, awkward attempts. Claire stopped asking about money. Then she stopped hinting about the house. Then one afternoon in August, she arrived with groceries and placed the receipt on the counter. I paid, she said. I looked at her. She looked embarrassed. I know that sounds ridiculous to announce. It doesn't, I said. She nodded. I'm learning. That was all. But sometimes all is more honest than a speech. Daniel remained distant, polite but careful. He no longer called me Margaret in that managerial tone. He called me Mom Holloway once by accident, then looked uncomfortable. I pretended not to notice. Sophie noticed everything. One evening while helping me wash dishes, she asked, "Do you forgive Mom?" I dried a plate slowly. "I love your mother." That's not what I asked. No, it wasn't. I set the plate in the cabinet. Forgiveness is not a light switch, sweetheart. Sometimes it is a road. Sometimes you walk it. Sometimes you sit down beside it for a while. Sophie thought about that. Are you sitting down? I smiled faintly. For now. She nodded. Then she handed me another plate. In September, the nonprofit held its first official gathering at my house. 12 women came. We served coffee, chicken salad sandwiches, apple cake, and more stories than the room could hold. Ruth brought flowers. Maribel brought crochet dishcloths. Joan brought nothing and apologized 3 times until I took her hands and said, "Your presence is enough." She cried. I almost did too. That evening after everyone left, I found Claire standing alone in the dining room, looking at the table. "I didn't know," she said. "What?" "How many women end up invisible?" I stood beside her. "Most people don't notice until they become one." Claire swallowed. "Is that how I made you feel?" I could have softened it. I did not. "Yes." Her face tightened. But she did not defend herself. That was new. "I'm sorry," she said. 2 words. Quiet. Imperfect. Late. But real enough to enter the room. I looked at her for a long moment. "Thank you." She waited, maybe hoping for more. I could not give more yet. And for once I did not force myself to. The following December arrived quietly. Snow returned to Vermont in soft silver layers, covering rooftops, fences, and sidewalks until the town looked dipped in sugar again. 1 year earlier, I had stood in my kitchen feeling like a guest in my own life. Now Christmas lights glowed across the front porch, cinnamon drifted through the house, and everything felt different. Not louder. Not grander. Just honest. I spent the morning hanging fresh greenery above the fireplace while old jazz records played softly. The house no longer carried tension inside its walls. Breathed easier. So did I. The residency program paperwork had been finalized months earlier. Twice a month, women gathered around my dining room table drinking coffee, trading recipes, sharing stories about rebuilding lives they never expected to rebuild. Some arrived quiet and embarrassed. Most left laughing. It turned out grief became lighter when nobody treated it like weakness. Around noon, headlights appeared through the falling snow. Sophie stepped out first, taller now at 13, bundled in a cream scarf with snowflakes clinging to her hair. She carried a pie box carefully against her chest. I opened the door before she could knock. "Merry Christmas, Grandma." "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." She hugged me tightly, smelling like winter air and peppermint lotion. Behind her, Daniel climbed out carrying grocery bags. Claire followed more quietly. She looked older somehow. Not physically. Just quieter around the eyes. For a moment we all stood awkwardly beneath the porch lights. Then Claire spoke. "I hope it's okay we came. A year ago, I would have rushed to comfort the tension for her. Smoothed things over. Pretended nothing hurt me. But peace built on silence is not peace." "It's okay," I answered. And surprisingly, I meant it. Dinner was smaller than Christmases used to be. Roast chicken. Mashed potatoes. Green beans with almonds. Sophie helped set the table while Sinatra hummed through the speakers. Some traditions deserved to survive. Others did not. During dessert, Sophie laughed so hard at one of Daniel's stories that cocoa nearly came out of her nose. The sound filled the room warmly. Claire looked around the table. "The house feels different," she said. It is. She nodded. Sophie talks about coming here constantly now. Sophie grinned. Because Grandma's house feels peaceful. Peaceful. Such a simple word. Such an expensive thing to earn back. Claire stared into her coffee. I was angry after last Christmas, she admitted. At first I thought you were punishing me. I waited. Snow tapped against the dining room windows. But honestly, she continued, I think I forgot this was your life before it was ever my inheritance. The room stayed still.
No dramatic tears.
No perfect forgiveness. Just truth finally arriving where entitlement used to sit. I looked around the dining room. The candlelight. Harold's clock ticking softly. Sophie stealing extra whipped cream. Life had not returned to what it was before. Some fractures never disappear completely. But not every ending needs to look like restoration. Sometimes healing simply means nobody is pretending anymore. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood alone at the kitchen window holding a warm mug of coffee while snow drifted across the backyard. The Christmas tree glowed behind me. The house felt full again. Not because people expected something from me, but because I finally understood the difference between being needed and being valued. And somewhere deep in the quiet of that winter night, I realized one more thing. Love given freely should never come with a receipt.